Thank you for joining me back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and we're going to jump straight back into a popular topic, I would say, over the last few days. Everyone seems to be talking about the Steelers, their preseason form, and just killing Russell Wilson over the course of these last few days, saying he's, done, there's no chance he starts, bring in Fields. People can't say enough that they want to start Justin Fields already after 2 preseason games, and it is what it is. It's the preseason. And that's where we're going to start with Arthur Smith, because I feel like he had the same approach to how I'm feeling, and I'm going to get more into my opinion after we talk a little bit here about Arthur Smith, because he spoke with the members of the media on Tuesday to give some feedback on the preseason Week 2 loss to the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, it's not great when, in any circumstance, really, when your team puts up 3 points, and if you're the offensive coordinator, coming in to this situation with the Steelers coming off of the bat of Matt Canada, already a struggling offense, you're supposed to come in here and, fix that. People want to see the results right away, and it's not been trending that way, so to say, for the Steelers so far through training camp and the preseason as well. But I think through the negatives, to me, Arthur Smith has kind of been keeping the right perspective when he's talking about this, because in his statement, I actually have it for you guys as well. In his statement, just on the preseason and how it's been going so far, he said, "The preseason can distort reality, good or bad. We've all seen it. That's not making excuses. That's not our standard. That's not acceptable. But at the same time, would rather go through that now than have that happen week 1. We've got to get out of our own way." And he mentioned it before, or we've talked about it before, but before I get to that point, just on this actual statement, it's pretty much just how I feel, and I feel like most people would have this same opinion, but the fact that I feel like it has to do a lot with Russell Wilson, it's kind of weird. I feel like not a lot of people are fans of Russell Wilson, so seeing how he performed, a lot of people want to put it on him, and yeah, he didn't look great, but a lot of it had to do with the offensive line. And just like Arthur Smith said, getting out of their own way. The offensive line wasn't great. I'm sure there was other things. I watched the game to some extent, but I can't just pinpoint. I'm sure there was penalties. I'm sure there was a lot of sloppy play. But the offense just never really got going right off the bat. Russell got, I think, sacked his first 3 drives, or just went 3 and out his first 3 drives as well. So you're stuttering, you're really struggling right off the bat, and it doesn't look great, obviously, with Russell penciled in to be the starting quarterback. But everyone's got to relax a little bit with the preseason. It's hit or miss, and it sways, I think, to very different spectrums of, just this expectation bar that we have a lot of the times, because we want to talk about, or I want to talk about the preseason, and sometimes when you have so much success in it, it's great. Once the preseason starts, you have a new offense, new quarterback, a whole new year starting, and in the preseason, if you're killing it, everyone thinks it's great, it's euphoric. Everyone's thinking that once the season starts, this is just going to play out exactly how we're seeing it. Let's have the regular season start right now. But that's exactly what happened last year. If Steelers fans or anybody wants to just go back to last year, you had Kenny Pickett, you had Matt Canada in, and Pittsburgh's starting offense, in those limited amount of reps that they got in the preseason, they scored on each of their 5 possessions. They scored touchdowns on each of the 5 times that the starting offense was out there, and, that's great. Everybody thought that this is awesome. Matt Canada finally got it together. Kenny Pickett, finally, in this year, he's going to take the Steelers to where they want to be. But you get to the regular season, they get smacked by the 49ers the first week. Then the second week, ugly win against the Cleveland Browns, and it just goes on in that same way. Good performance, awful performance, but somehow you still win. So, and then it just, you don't really keep it at a consistent pace. And, Matt Canada gets fired halfway through that year, and then you have a rotating system of offensive coordinators, and you have to start all over. So it's not always a great sign when your team is playing great in the preseason, because you're not playing the same level of talent, and everyone's just not ready yet to that same level of intensity as it is in the regular season, obviously. So that's one thing. And it is kind of funny how this lines up with the Titans and everything like that, because it seems like Arthur Smith has been in this situation before, and oddly enough, it all lines up almost like it has played out so far with the Steelers now. And by that I mean, you look at 2019 when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. You look at their preseason, they struggled. In Arthur Smith's words back then, he said that they did not have a sharp preseason, so you're feeling skeptical heading towards the start of the regular season. And don't you know it, once the regular season starts, Tennessee overall throughout that year in 2019 was 10th in the NFL in scoring that season, and also in their Week 1 matchup, they put up 43 points in their Week 1 game after an unconvincing preseason. Now, for history to repeat itself exactly like that, unlikely, but it just goes to show that you can't take too much from the preseason and think it's going to play out exactly as you see it in the regular season. And I do admit that you can learn a lot and you can tell some things from the preseason. It's not completely like useless or anything like that. I'm not trying to say that, because the biggest things to me when you look at the preseason and building these good habits or bad habits, trying to get rhythm, the decision making is one of the biggest things. We talked about it with Daniel Jones, and the decision making that you see, the discipline is another one, and also just the overall effort. Arthur Smith mentioned that the effort was unacceptable, so that's one thing that is just a non-negotiable. That has to be there. There's no other way around it. And then I mentioned the discipline, the penalty and everything like that. That has to be cleaned up. That, again, can't be something that is there one week and isn't there the other week. That always has to be there for the elite teams. And then the decision-making, because the decision-making isn't really just a preseason, we're just getting warmed up and everything like that. The Steelers don't have all these rookies starting in some of the biggest, spots around the team, if that makes sense. Yeah, they might be starting on the offensive line, and that's where the discipline comes in, right? To make sure you know the snap count, make sure you're not jumping off sides, you're not holding or anything like that. But the decision-making in terms of the quarterbacks making the right reads, making sure you're in your right spots, the assignments and everything like that, and just along those lines, the decision-making is a big part of it, because that comes with experience. That comes with just playing and the reputation you have in the NFL. That's not something that, you're kind of getting warmed up into. You know what the right play is supposed to be. So that's really a big deal in the preseason. But when you're looking at the rhythm, the overall state and form of an offense in the preseason, if they make a couple of mistakes, just overthrows and things like that, but it is the right decision, that stuff's going to get cleaned up, especially when you have guys in spots like the quarterback position or the wide receiver position that you can trust. And I feel pretty comfortable with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields as guys that I can trust to make the right decisions, most of the time at least. So that's really where I stand on taking the preseason seriously in one aspect, but in another one, just dying down the expectations in some of these, just because it does come with some patience, some just time with this team, especially when you're really wavering with a new offensive coordinator coming in, some new pieces coming in as well. It's gonna take some time. So once we see it all play out, once we see them, everything come into fruition, it's gonna be huge. This next preseason game that they have coming up. It seems like Russell Wilson is going to start in that, and it seems like most of the starters are going to play in it as well. So that'll be one of the last tests to see all these things, be in action. The decision making has to be there. Russell Wilson, not so great in the second one, but he was still, it seems like, a little bit limited in Arthur Smith's words. He said he didn't call everything that he wanted to with Russell Wilson just because he didn't have enough snaps, enough reps over training camp to still be open to the full playbook. So they expect to not have any limitations now on Russell Wilson. He's probably penciled in to start once again, but we're going to see Justin Fields. We're going to see the starting offense, the starting offensive line, and how bad Broderick Jones struggled in that game. Everyone's going to have their chance to reprimand that and just get everything in line, because this is the last test, like I mentioned, when they take on the Detroit Lions on Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be tuning into that. Hopefully it turns out to be a little bit better. You got to have at least one good performance in the preseason. There's not too much at stake in the preseason. I stand firm on that, but you can't go 0-3, not ideally, to make everybody feel great. You got to at least win one game. But with all that being said, it's, again, the preseason. They're just trying to get everything in line. A lot of the teams, and I think a lot of people just in the media have mentioned that. I think Bill Cowher mentioned it, actually, to be specific, that, he feels like Arthur Smith isn't showing everything yet on offense, and that could very well be the case. People approach the preseason differently, and I wouldn't be surprised. Why would you show everything right away in this environment? So Saturday is going to be big for the quarterbacks, especially Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and this offense as well, trying to get on the right page as they gear up for that Week 1 matchup against Arthur Smith's old team in the Atlanta Falcons. So that'll be that. That is that on the Steelers and their preseason struggles so far. A couple more topics to get to on today's show. Kevin Stefanski mentioned Patrick Mahomes as one of the most influential people just in the world of football and compared him to Steph Curry. So we're going to talk about those comments and give my just thoughts on some more influential athletes in today's sporting world, in athletics here nowadays. And also, just lastly, for the last segment, we're going to go over just a brief injury report to some of the biggest stars. Saquon Barkley, Deshaun Watson, Penei Sewell, and Christian McCaffrey will all feature in that last segment. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.